In the deep silence of space, the human diplomatic vessel Artemis Dawn floated peacefully near the edge of Council-controlled space. The crew was calm, respectful, and fully focused on their mission, to bring a simple message of peace. Humanity had come a long way since its early days in the galaxy. Once ignored and overlooked by more advanced species, humans had slowly earned a place at the table. They were known for being patient, cooperative, and polite. They followed the rules, respected council laws, and avoided conflict wherever possible. That's why the crew of the Artemis Dawn never expected what happened that day. As they requested permission to pass through a neutral zone to attend a diplomatic summit, the response from the alien command station came back cold and sharp: denied. Turn back immediately or be fired upon. The words hung in the air of the ship's bridge like a shadow. Captain Elara Cross, known for her calm and level-headed nature, raised an eyebrow but didn't react emotionally. "Repeat our request," she said softly. "Let them know we are unarmed and attending on official council invitation." The communication officer obeyed, sending a second message. But the response was worse. The alien voice returned, this time filled with mockery. "Your kind speaks of peace, but hides behind fake smiles. We don't believe your words. We don't trust your faces. Turn back or be erased." The crew stared at each other. The humans had dealt with racism and prejudice before. It wasn't new. But this was different. This wasn't just disrespect. It was a direct threat. For a few seconds, the bridge remained quiet. No one moved. No one spoke. Captain Cross finally stood up, her boots softly echoing on the floor as she walked to the main screen. Outside, they could see the alien blockade, 8 warships, all armed, all facing them. The humans had no weapons active, no shields raised, just silence. "Send one more message," she ordered. "Let them know we are not here to fight, but we will not back down from this path." The officer nodded. The message was sent. The answer came quickly. The alien commander laughed, a cruel, high-pitched sound. "You humans never learn. Maybe this time, we'll teach you what happens when weak species act bold." Then their ships began to charge weapons. That's when it happened. No alarms went off. No panic. The crew didn't run. There was no shouting, no chaos. Instead, something in their eyes changed. The polite smiles faded. The friendly expressions vanished. Captain Cross turned back to her crew and gave one simple nod. "Activate the Athena protocol." The entire ship seemed to shift. Lights dimmed, systems woke up from deep standby, and the ship's outer hull began to hum with hidden energy. The aliens had no idea what was coming. For years, humanity had played along with the Council's rules. They had kept their strongest technologies hidden, their most advanced AI locked away, and their war-trained soldiers in the shadows. But they had never stopped preparing. Earth knew that peace was fragile in a galaxy full of prideful empires. And when the day came that politeness was no longer enough, they would be ready. The Artemis Dawn, once a peaceful diplomatic ship, unfolded. Panels shifted, sleek weapons emerged from hidden bays, and cloaked defense systems activated. Within moments, it was not a helpless envoy. It was a stealth combat ship, faster and smarter than anything in its class. The alien fleet took a second to react. They hadn't expected this. They fired, but their shots missed. The Artemis Dawn moved like a ghost, slipping between beams of light and blasts of plasma. The humans didn't return fire. Not yet. Instead, they began jamming the enemy signals, slicing into their command channels, and disabling targeting systems. It was clean, efficient, controlled. On the alien bridge, panic set in. Their ships began to lose control one by one. Engines slowed. Shields failed. The human ship was dancing between them, untouchable. Captain Cross leaned forward, her voice calm. "Transmit this message." We asked politely. We remained patient, but we are not weak. We are not blind. and we are no longer afraid. As the message spread through open space, other human ships uncloaked nearby. More diplomatic vessels, now revealed to be part of a hidden response fleet. Each ship was built not to destroy, but to dominate through precision and speed. The alien blockade, outnumbered and outmatched, stood no chance. But still, not a single human shot hit a vital system. They didn't kill. They didn't destroy. They proved a point. The aliens tried to retreat, but their navigation systems were frozen. The humans had already taken control of their ships. One by one, the Council warships were shut down, engines off, weapons offline, shields disabled. Then, with complete silence, the humans moved past them, slowly, as if to say, "This is what you chose." Across the galaxy, word spread fast. Species that had always seen humans as friendly, quiet, and forgettable were now hearing new stories. Stories of a force that moved like wind and struck without warning. But more terrifying than their power was their control. They didn't boast. They didn't threaten. They simply acted. One moment, they were polite. The next, unstoppable. Some council members demanded an emergency meeting, shouting that humanity had betrayed their position. But others, especially those who had secretly feared what humans could become, sat in silence. They knew the truth. The council had created this moment. Years of pushing, mocking, and suppressing Earth had finally reached the breaking point. And Earth had answered, not with noise, but with purpose. Back aboard the Artemis Dawn, Captain Cross stood by the window, watching the stars drift by. Her crew returned to calm status, weapons back in hiding, systems returning to civilian mode. The danger was over. For now. But something had changed in that moment. Not just for the crew. For all of humanity. The mask had come off. The galaxy had seen what lay underneath the politeness, and it would never forget. The Artemis Dawn continued its journey, cutting through the vastness of space, leaving behind the broken remnants of the alien fleet. The stars outside, distant and cold, seemed to reflect the stillness within the ship. But the crew knew something had changed. The galaxy had seen humanity's true face, and it wasn't one they were likely to forget anytime soon. Captain Elara Cross stood in the command center, her hands resting lightly on the console. Her eyes, usually calm and focused, were sharp now, calculating, thoughtful. The weight of what they had done was heavy, but it was not the weight of regret. It was the weight of a promise made long ago. If humanity were ever pushed to the edge, it would push back harder. And now the galaxy knew. The Artemis Dawn was no longer a simple diplomatic ship. It was a symbol, a warning. They were no longer seen as the polite, harmless species they once were. They were a force. "Captain," said Lieutenant Terran, the tactical officer, breaking the silence. "The Council has issued a formal request for a meeting." Cross turned toward him, her expression unreadable. "A request or an order?" Terran glanced down at the console. "Officially, it's a request. But there's an underlying tone of urgency. They want answers." Cross gave a small nod. "Let's see what they want." The Artemis Dawn adjusted its course, setting a path toward the Council's central meeting station. Despite the calm, every crew member was on edge. They knew the Council wouldn't be pleased. They wouldn't forget what had happened. But at the same time, there was something else, something deeper. The galaxy had just witnessed a new side of humanity, a side no one had expected, and perhaps a side they now feared. As they approached the Council station, an eerie silence filled the ship. No one spoke. The officers at their stations were focused, but the air felt heavy, as if the crew itself was holding its breath. Cross took a deep breath and walked to the central briefing room. The Council chamber was grand, a massive hall surrounded by high curved walls made of glass, with panoramic views of distant stars. The leaders of the Council, a dozen different species, sat at a massive circular table, each face a mix of curiosity, concern, and something more. Fear. They didn't know what to expect from the humans now. When the Artemis Dawn docked, the crew stepped off in full uniform. They were not the meek diplomats they had once been. Now, there was a presence about them, a confidence that came from knowing their true strength. Captain Cross was the first to speak as she entered the chamber. "We are here to discuss the future of the galaxy. But first, I believe we need to address the events that took place near the neutral zone," she said, her voice calm, but carrying the weight of someone who had been pushed too far. The council members exchanged looks, their faces uncertain. Finally, the leader of the Zelrath species, a towering alien with 4 eyes and a face full of sharp angles, stood up. "You humans have shown something we did not expect," the Zelrath leader said, his voice heavy with both awe and caution. "You have shown us strength, something we thought was beneath you." "Why?" Cross met his gaze, unflinching. "We've always had strength," she said simply. "You just never bothered to look for it." The council shifted uneasily, the words hanging in the air like a challenge. The tone of the meeting had changed. There were no polite gestures now, no empty promises. Humanity had thrown down a gauntlet, and the galaxy had no choice but to respond. "We didn't ask for conflict," Captain Cross continued, her voice growing steady and firm. "We asked for peace. We asked for respect. But you chose to dismiss us, to treat us as insignificant. And now you will listen." The other members of the council shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The way Cross spoke was almost alien to them. It wasn't the polite, accommodating tone they had come to expect from the humans. This was something different. This was a declaration. "You've shown us what happens when we push you too far," said a thin insectoid alien from the planet Drake, its many legs clicking nervously on the floor. "But we don't understand. Why did you wait so long to reveal your power?" Cross glanced around the room, taking in the mixed faces of confusion, fear, and perhaps even grudging respect. "We didn't wait. We were patient," she said. "We followed your rules. We played the game. But there's a limit. We are not weak, and we are not here to be pawns in your political games." The council was silent, their eyes narrowing as the gravity of her words sank in. This was not a request for peace anymore. This was a statement of dominance. Humanity had revealed its strength, and it was not backing down. "Do you expect us to bow to you now?" asked an elder from the Quinath species, their voice sharp and wary. "No," Cross said. "We don't want your submission. We want respect. We want an equal place in this galaxy. And we'll get it, one way or another." For a moment, the room was dead silent. Then, slowly, the other members of the council began to speak, not with anger, but with uncertainty, as if they were realizing something that had been hidden all along. Humanity was no longer the weak species they had once underestimated. They were a force to be reckoned with. Finally, the Zelrath leader spoke again, his voice low and hesitant. "So, what now, human? What do you want from us?" Captain Cross stood tall, her eyes steady. "We want a seat at the table. A real one. Not as guests, but as equals. The galaxy needs balance, and if you want to keep peace, you'll learn to respect humanity." The meeting ended shortly after that. There was no dramatic agreement, no sudden handshake. Instead, there was a quiet, tense agreement to speak further. The council was not yet ready to accept humanity fully, but they could no longer ignore them. Humanity had drawn a line in the sand, and the galaxy would have to decide whether to cross it or stand behind it. As the Artemis Dawn left the council station, Captain Cross stood on the bridge, her fingers lightly brushing against the glass. She looked out at the stars once again, her thoughts distant. The road ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear: humanity's place in the galaxy had changed forever, and no one would ever see them as weak again. The moment the Artemis Dawn left the council station, the atmosphere aboard the ship was charged. Captain Cross stood at the front of the bridge, her gaze fixed on the stars outside. There was no more doubt in her mind. Humanity had shifted. The polite diplomatic species that had once been viewed as a peaceful, unthreatening race was now a force that demanded respect. She could feel the weight of that realization pressing on her shoulders. "Captain," Lieutenant Terran's voice broke the silence, his tone uneasy. "We've just received a transmission from the Zelrath. They want to know when we'll be ready to negotiate terms." Cross turned slowly, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Terms." She repeated the word as though she didn't quite believe it. "Tell them we'll be ready when they are. But there will be no more games. No more pretending." Terran nodded, typing rapidly on his console. "Understood, Captain." The message was sent, a simple but powerful statement. Humanity was no longer willing to play by anyone's rules but their own. They would no longer be ignored, underestimated, or silenced. The Council's decision to dismiss them was a mistake, and now they would have to face the consequences. The days that followed were tense. Across the galaxy, the news spread. The moment the Council's meeting with the humans ended, whispers turned into rumors, and rumors turned into fearful conversations. The other species in the galaxy began to wonder if they had misjudged humanity all along. They began to ask questions that were not easily answered. What had caused the change in the humans? Why had they suddenly dropped their facade of politeness and submission? More importantly, what did it mean for the future of the galaxy? The Zelrath, who had once seen humanity as nothing more than a weak, unimportant species, found themselves rethinking their position. Their vast empire had been built on the idea of dominating weaker races, expanding their reach with no real challenge. But humanity had challenged them, and won. That sent a ripple of fear through the other species. If the humans could defeat the Zelrath, who was next? What would happen if humanity turned its attention to other powers? The possibility was terrifying. Soon, the diplomatic channels began to open in full force. Messages came flooding in from all corners of the galaxy. The Tharsha, the Aldar, the Draxian, all powerful species, each with their own fleets and armies, requested meetings. Some offered promises of alliances, others offered threats. They were all trying to figure out where they stood in this new reality. Humanity had become the unknown variable, and the galaxy was not ready for the consequences of that. Inside the Artemis Dawn, Captain Cross gathered her crew for an emergency briefing. The atmosphere in the room was one of mixed emotions: anticipation, fear, and the adrenaline of knowing that everything had changed. "The next few days will be critical," Cross began, addressing her crew. "We've shown the galaxy what we are capable of, but now we must decide how to proceed. We will not back down, but we must be strategic." Lieutenant Terran spoke up. "We've already received several messages asking for us to stand down. They're nervous. They want us to fall back into line." Cross smiled faintly, but there was no humor in it. "They'll have to learn that we no longer follow their line. We create our own path now." The crew nodded in agreement, their faces set in determination. The galaxy had seen humanity's power, and now they would either respect it or face the consequences. The first of the meetings arrived soon after. The Zelrath were the first to reach out. Their message was simple, yet loaded with meaning. "We request a formal negotiation." The crew gathered again, preparing to respond. Captain Cross knew this would be a pivotal moment. It was one thing to show the galaxy that humanity had strength. It was another to turn that strength into something sustainable, something that could keep them from being pushed around again. "Captain," Terran said, his voice laced with concern, "do you think they'll try something? After what happened, I can't imagine the Zelrath just letting us walk away with no consequences." "I don't know," Cross replied. "But that's why we'll be ready for whatever comes. We've made our move. Now we have to stay 2 steps ahead of them." The negotiation meeting took place aboard the Artemis Dawn, with the Zelrath leadership in a secure communication room, their towering figures filling the large screen. The tension was palpable as both sides faced each other across the digital divide. Captain Cross, the Zelrath leader, spoke, his multiple eyes narrowing as he addressed her. You have proven that humanity is not to be underestimated, but I hope you understand that we cannot simply allow your rise to power without addressing it." Cross met his gaze, her voice calm but firm. "We don't want power, Zelrath. We want equality. We want respect. We will no longer tolerate being treated as lesser." The Zelrath leader hesitated. It was a rare moment of uncertainty for him, and it was clear that he did not know how to respond. His species was built on conquest and domination, not negotiation or equality. But humanity had thrown that idea into chaos. They had shown that even the strongest species could fall if they weren't careful. "You are asking for something we are not accustomed to," the Zelrath leader said slowly. "But we are willing to listen." Captain Cross nodded, her expression hardening. "You'll have to listen, and you'll have to change, or we will force the galaxy to listen to us." As the meeting ended, the Artemis Dawn turned back toward their station, the weight of the moment hanging in the air. Cross stood at the front of the ship, looking out into the infinite dark of space. "We've made our stand," she whispered to herself, knowing full well that humanity had crossed a line. The galaxy might never be the same, and there was no going back. But they were ready for whatever came next. They had shown the galaxy that humanity was no longer a passive player. They were not weak. And now, the universe would have to learn to respect them, whether it liked it or not. The tension in the galaxy had reached an all-time high. The message sent by Captain Cross and humanity had been received loud and clear. The other species, once confident in their superiority, were now faced with the undeniable truth. Humanity was not the harmless, peaceful race they had once believed. Humanity was a force to be reckoned with. But the response from the galaxy was not what Cross expected. Instead of a wave of acceptance or fear, there was something far more insidious. It was the silent treatment, a chilling quiet from those who once stood as humanity's allies and enemies alike. No messages, no calls for negotiations, no offers of alliance, just silence, as if humanity had been cast into the shadows. Yet Captain Cross knew better than to assume the galaxy had simply lost interest. This silence was something more dangerous. There was something lurking just out of sight, an unseen force that was quietly building in response to humanity's rise. And it was not going to stop until humanity was either crushed or forced back into the shadows. On the Artemis Dawn, the crew worked tirelessly to prepare for what was to come. Supplies were stocked, weapons were checked and rechecked, and every member of the ship was on high alert. There was no way of knowing exactly what this new threat would look like, but Cross knew it was coming. And when it did, humanity would be ready. "This isn't just about the Zelrath anymore," Captain Cross told her crew during a briefing. "We've shown the galaxy that we're not to be ignored. But the silence, it's not just an absence of words. There are forces gathering, plotting, and we can't afford to let our guard down." Lieutenant Terran, ever the pessimist, leaned forward. "Do you think the other races are planning to attack us? To wipe us out before we get any stronger?" Cross met his gaze. "I don't think it's that simple. If it was just about power, they'd have acted by now. This is something else. I'm not sure what it is yet, but I feel it, and we'll find out soon enough." In the weeks that followed, small incidents began to occur all over the galaxy. Ships vanished from the outer rim without a trace. Fleet commanders reported strange energy surges and unusual sensor readings. The crews of entire ships seemed to disappear in an instant. The galaxy was becoming more unstable, but it wasn't just humanity's actions that were causing the chaos. It was something else, something far more sinister. The reports were unsettling, but Captain Cross knew that they were just the beginning. She had no doubt that the galaxy was reacting to humanity's bold move. And now, the time had come to face whatever was hidden in the shadows. One night, as the Artemis Dawn drifted in the cold, empty expanse of space, an unexpected transmission came through. The voice on the other end was distorted, nearly impossible to understand. But there was one phrase that was clear as day. "We see you, humanity, and we are watching." It wasn't from any known species. It wasn't from the Zelrath or any other faction humanity had encountered before. It was something completely new, something far more dangerous than anything humanity had ever faced. Cross's mind raced. What the hell does that mean? She muttered under her breath. Captain, the transmission has been traced, Terran said, his voice tense. It's coming from the fringes of the galaxy, from the unknown zone. Cross turned to face him, her eyes narrowing. The unknown zone was a place feared by all, a region of space where no one had dared to venture in centuries. It was said to be the home of ancient beings, forgotten by time, and lost to history. No one knew what was out there, but the stories, the rumors, were enough to make even the bravest hesitate. We need to go there, Cross said, her voice resolute. Prepare the ship. We're heading into the unknown zone. The journey was treacherous. The further they traveled into the unknown zone, the more unstable the space became. Their sensors were scrambled, and every attempt to communicate with other ships was met with silence. It felt as though the very fabric of reality was warping around them. The crew grew uneasy, their nerves fraying with each passing hour. But Captain Cross remained calm. She had seen the galaxy at its worst, and she wasn't about to let fear take hold now. Humanity had been underestimated before, and now it was time to show the galaxy that their new strength was not just a response. It was the beginning of something far greater. The Artemis Dawn reached the edge of the unknown zone, and what they saw next left the crew speechless. In the distance, there was a massive structure, an ancient, sprawling city floating in space. It was unlike anything they had ever seen. Its architecture was both beautiful and terrifying, with spires that seemed to stretch into infinity. The city pulsed with energy, an eerie glow emanating from its depths. Is that? Terran began, his voice faltering. It's real, Cross answered, and it's not abandoned. The transmission had led them here, to this strange, otherworldly city. And now, they were about to find out who, or what, was behind it. As the Artemis Dawn approached the city, the ship's systems began to malfunction. The closer they got, the more unstable everything became. The crew fought to keep control of the ship, but it was clear that they were no longer in control. Then a voice, clear and loud, boomed across the ship's intercom, echoing through every corner of the Artemis Dawn. We warned you, humans. You do not belong here. Turn back or face the consequences. The voice was cold, devoid of emotion, but it was powerful, and it sent a shiver down Cross's spine. This was not just a species. This was something ancient, something far beyond anything humanity had faced before. But there was no turning back now. Get ready, Captain Cross said, her voice steady. We're about to find out exactly who, or what, has been watching us. The crew of the Artemis Dawn braced themselves as the massive city loomed larger and the unknown force revealed itself. What they didn't know was that this was only the beginning of an even greater conflict, one that would test humanity's strength like never before. The galaxy had seen humanity as weak, unthreatening, but now, humanity would show them just how far they were willing to go to protect their place in the universe. The city before them was alive with energy, its towering structures casting long, jagged shadows across the space around it. It was like a living organism, pulsing with an eerie rhythm that sent waves of dread through the crew. As the Artemis Dawn approached, the very fabric of the universe seemed to tremble. There was no escape from the sense that this was no ordinary place. Captain Cross stood at the helm, her hands gripping the console. She had been in countless battles, faced unimaginable odds, but nothing compared to the feeling in her gut as they moved closer to the ancient city. There was something old, ancient, and terrifying hidden within its walls, and it was clear now that the galaxy had made a grave mistake in underestimating humanity. The voice that had spoken through the ship's intercom echoed once again, filling the room with an unsettling presence. You have been warned, humans. Leave now, and we will forget this encounter. But if you persist, you will never leave. There is no escape. Cross's resolve only hardened. She had not come this far to turn back. The stakes were too high. For too long, humanity had been dismissed as weak, as inconsequential. The galaxy thought they could control them, manipulate them, and use them as pawns. But now, humanity was proving that they were not to be controlled. Not anymore. "Prepare for entry," Captain Cross commanded, her voice unwavering. "We go in. Full power." The crew moved quickly, working together in sync, ready to face whatever awaited them inside the city. There was no plan, no guarantee that they would make it out alive. But they were ready. Humanity had always fought for survival, for freedom, and they would fight for it now, against an unknown enemy unlike anything they had ever faced. As the Artemis Dawn entered the city's orbit, the ship was pulled into a force field, invisible to the naked eye, but powerful enough to manipulate the ship's trajectory. It was as if they had been captured, pulled into the very heart of the unknown. Inside the city, the atmosphere was thick with tension. The walls were adorned with ancient symbols, strange markings that no one on the ship could decipher. The air felt heavy, charged with something they couldn't quite understand. As they moved deeper into the city, the silence grew more oppressive. The entire structure seemed to be watching them, waiting. Suddenly, the ship's lights flickered, and the crew was plunged into darkness. The hum of the ship's engines ceased. It was as if the city itself had swallowed their very presence. "This is it," Terran muttered, his voice tense. "We've lost power." "No," Cross said, her voice calm. "We haven't lost power. We've entered their domain. And they're showing us that they control everything here. But we're not backing down." She knew that in this moment, the Artemis Dawn wasn't just a ship. It was humanity's voice, their defiance. They would not kneel to any force, no matter how powerful. Moments later, a bright, blinding light filled the chamber. The crew shielded their eyes as the light intensified, and when it finally dimmed, standing before them was a figure unlike any they had ever seen. It was tall, cloaked in shimmering robes that seemed to merge with the very air around it. Its face was hidden, its features obscured by a veil of light, but the presence of the figure was overwhelming. It was a being of immense power, ancient beyond understanding. "You have trespassed where you do not belong," the figure said, its voice deep and resonant, echoing in their minds. "The galaxy was not meant to know of your existence. You were to remain in the shadows." Captain Cross stepped forward, undaunted by the figure's imposing presence. "We were never meant to remain in the shadows. Humanity's time has come. We will no longer be forgotten or ignored." The figure studied her for a long moment, its unseen gaze piercing through her very soul. "You think you understand power, human, but you have no idea what you are dealing with." Cross's heart raced, but she stood tall. "I know enough. I know that humanity has survived worse than this, and we will survive this too. We will rise, or we will burn trying. But we will not bow to you." The figure's voice shifted, its tone growing colder, more menacing. "You are playing with forces you cannot comprehend. The galaxy is vast, and there are powers far older and more powerful than you can imagine. What you seek is not a victory, but your own destruction." "We're not afraid of destruction," Cross said, "because when it's over, humanity will still be here. The galaxy may fear us, but we will never fear it. You're mistaken if you think you can intimidate us. We've faced extinction before and emerged stronger. So bring your destruction. We'll face it head-on." For a long moment, the figure did not respond. The tension in the room was unbearable, as if the fate of the galaxy hung in the balance. Finally, it spoke again, its voice dark and filled with a strange kind of resignation. "You have made your choice, human. And now you will see what happens when you awaken the darkness that slumbers within the void." The ground beneath them trembled, and the walls began to shift, as though the very city was coming alive. The figure raised its hands, and the entire chamber seemed to ripple, warping in impossible ways. Cross's heart pounded as she prepared for the worst. But even in the face of overwhelming power, one thing was clear: humanity would not back down. Not now, not ever. The galaxy had underestimated them for too long. And now, humanity would show them what it meant to stand against the impossible.